Hello there. Can everybody hear me? Welcome to Facebook Live. Please post a comment if you are on and can hear me okay. We're just getting started with Ask a Naturalist. Just going to allow for a few seconds here to see if the technological glitches work themselves out, but I'd love to hear if anybody is on and can post a comment here just to give some affirmation. Oh, good. Thank you, Melanie. Welcome, everybody else. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, so hang in there as a few other people join. Welcome everybody. Looks like a few folks are in, so I'm going to jump right into it here. Good morning, and I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Director of Land Management with New Hampshire Audubon, and I'm now in my usual spot here on the second Thursday of each month. This is going to be my regular slot. Becky Swamala is the other naturalist who's typically on most weeks, so Becky and I are going to be sharing and talking about a few different topics. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining me here at this lunch hour today. I'm here at my home in Hancock, New Hampshire, in southwestern New Hampshire. I'm looking out the window as always, got my binoculars handy. I hope you do as well. You should be spending some time watching the birds and whatever else is happening outside your window, if you can't be outside, which is even better. So right now, it's mid-January, it's midwinter in New England, and things could seem a little bit static at this point of the year in the world of nature. It would probably help if we got a little extra snow here in fall. It's been a while since we've had any snow in this part of the world. I know some people probably groan when they hear that, but who here likes snow? How about a few thumbs ups for snow? Anybody? Or hearts or something. Let's give a little love to the snow. We need it. Nature needs it. Snow is really important in this part of the world in the winter. We have wildlife and plants that are adapted to snow conditions. And at this point, we haven't had a good snowstorm besides a couple of little dustings in the past couple of weeks, providing for some really nice tracking substrate on those mornings after it does snow a little bit. But things, at least in my backyard, where I am at my window here, are pretty icy as of this morning. Things are starting to get a little bit icy and hard to walk around in the woods. Feel like I've set tracks down in most places and they end up getting slippery, so maybe you're having some of the same experiences. Everything working out okay here? Just I'm hoping everybody's hearing me okay and can see the video. Good. All right. So yeah, I'll jump into bulk of what I'm hoping to talk about today and answer some of your questions too in this usual weekly spot that New Hampshire Audubon hosts. So yeah, just a little bit more about what's going on here out in the woods. The feeders, the bird feeders, have been pretty busy this winter, at least in my part of the world, and on a lot of the Christmas bird counts that I conducted and participated in. I was seeing birds at bird feeders, more so than in places in the woods. The woods are starting to get kind of on the quiet side. They have been fairly quiet, with the exception of a few little patchy areas. But are you noticing bird feeders? Lots of activity? I'd love to hear from you and hear what your observations are right now. Becky talked about Christmas bird counts last week, a little bit of a wrap-up of what she was noticing and some of the trends that she had seen. I think collectively in New Hampshire, at least, we've noticed that the tallies of feeder birds were very high. There were some pretty strong tallies of birds coming to bird feeders. And we're all wondering if these trends are going to continue into February when the Backyard Winter Bird Survey takes place. This is an annual event conducted by New Hampshire Audubon in which all of you can participate. It's what we call community science. It used to be known as citizen science, but the trend is to call that community science, and everybody can participate and be scientists in your own rights and send us data from what you've been noticing in your backyard. There are very specific instructions on how to complete the bird survey. I'm going to post a link on the feed here in case anybody wants to join in and see how to participate from your own backyard on the weekend of February 13th and 14th. That's when this occurs, always around the second weekend. So, link should be coming here. All right, hopefully that worked. So yeah, what are you seeing? I'd love to answer some of your questions about the natural world, and let me know some of your observations too. I'll do my best to discuss and answer some of those questions that you might have. So let's hear it. Start putting them in the feed now if you can. I have a few questions from Pamela that I'll try to get to later, and a couple of others have sent in some questions over the weeks. So yeah, today I'm going to discuss some of the occurrences in the natural world, as always, and in the world of birds. I already talked a little bit about the bird feeders, and I'd like to highlight a few things. I'll mention rare birds in New Hampshire, as always. That's a popular topic. Winter mammals, another topic that is close to my heart. I've been noticing a lot of tracks, and maybe some of you have as well. And I'll share a couple of tips for visiting one of New Hampshire Audubon's wildlife sanctuaries. That's going to be some of the area that I'm going to focus on every time that I'm in this slot, since that's the role that I conduct for New Hampshire Audubon. As the Director of Land Management, I'm responsible for the management of the 7,500 acres of natural places that we own in 39 different locations in the state, which we call wildlife sanctuaries. So I'll talk about one of those later on. But as it's a new year, I wanted to talk about some of my own personal bird-focused goals for 2021. I thought it might be a fun way to start and see if I could generate any discussion based on that, and any ideas that maybe some of you could incorporate into your daily lives. So going back a year ago, it was a very different world. It's January 2020. So I think it was today, a year ago, I was on my way to the island of Trinidad off of the South American coast to lead a nature tour. It's a very verdant and bird-filled country, and it was a real welcome break at the time. I remember, aside from never having been there before and always excited to see their birds, it was a nice break from the dead of winter in New England, from the snowy, wintry conditions. And certainly it satisfied my urge to explore, to see many new birds, and just to get a change of pace and some novelty in my life. So it was an excellent trip. It was about a 10-day trip. I'm really glad I had that opportunity then, of course, because I haven't really had one like that since, and it's going to be some time until many of us can do that kind of traveling again. So perhaps some of you had the good fortune to visit Trinidad or another warm weather birding destination last winter. I'd love to hear if you have, or have any places on your wish list. But being that this sort of travel just isn't in the cards for most of us this year, the adventure seekers among us were being forced to find novelty in our own ways, in our much reduced home ranges around our houses, our backyards, maybe our local favorite wildlife sanctuaries or parks. For me, that's been one of the silver linings of this pandemic, is it's really helped change the way that I've looked at the common things. So So when thinking about a year ago again to my trip, instead of the excitement about seeing a splash of bright red, such as the scarlet ibis, I'll show you a picture here, of which I saw thousands in large flocks in Trinidad. This is a very exotic scarlet ibis. Just an unreal color, but that's really what they look like. And I saw about 10,000 flying into a roost site in a large lagoon area. It just turned all the mangrove trees bright red, bright pink. It was truly one of the most remarkable birding experiences in my life. But instead of that kind of splash of excitement here at home, we're having to settle for getting excited about maybe the splash of red of a rufous-colored Carolina wren that visits our backyard bird feeders. It's not every winter I see Carolina wrens in my backyard here in Hancock. In fact, this has been a really good year for them. So I've found a way to replace that excitement about travel. Granted, it's not the same thing, but getting pretty excited about this wren. It seems to have a winter roost site in our old phoebe nest underneath the screen porch in our house. So it's actually tucking into the nest at night. It's so neat getting to see this little guy fly in just before dark and spend the night in a nice warm spot. Not sure what's going to happen come early April, late March when the phoebe comes back, if they're going to have to duke it out for that spot or see who wins. But and then also in Trinidad, we would be sipping coffee on the veranda of a beautiful eco lodge, looking at any number of interesting ornate hummingbirds, such as this little guy here, one of my favorites, the tufted coquette. Just really remarkable coloration and patterning on this male tufted coquette here. So obviously we don't have that kind of excitement now in winter in New Hampshire. So instead of that, I've been spending a lot of my mornings holding on to my coffee mug, just the same as I would be, but really hanging on to it for the heat that it provides for my hands as I'm slowly moseying around my backyard and driveway and looking for any number of birds that might be out here. 15 of which I've already tracked down this morning. 15 different species in the yard. So there's plenty to see. You just have to kind of know how to be okay with finding novelty in these little things, and it takes a little practice. So I'm hoping to share a few of those tips today with you. So I'm really trying to keep my eyes peeled and always look out for the unusual things, the exciting things that I don't see every day. But I'm trying to really fully appreciate the common birds and the common nature experiences that we're used to seeing day in and day out, and learn something about them too. So I'm finding plenty of little exciting things like that in my own backyard day to day. Winter, though, can feel like a very predictable time of year and has that feeling of stagnation at times, especially in the dead of winter, which we're really approaching now. But if you do pay close attention and use this opportunity to experience a place day in and day out, even if it's just being able to get out once a week maybe, as some of us can't get outside every day, you'll see just how dynamic our natural world is, even in the middle of winter. So I'd love to hear what you're all seeing. Feel free to chime in with your comments and questions. So a few of my strategy suggestions for having that type of experience in the natural world is taking the same walk twice. I'm borrowing that line. I can't remember who first said that, but take the same walk twice. Really get to know a place and its natural inhabitants by really trying to understand that place and just what makes it tick. How the birds are connected to the natural worlds, what critters are maybe hiding. Maybe it takes you a few trips in order to see something for the first time that's been right there under your nose all this time. It happens to me all the time. So take the same walk twice. Have your eyes wide open to the possibilities, ears as well. Always looking and listening, keeping your binoculars handy. I'd suggest that as an important strategy. I keep mine right here on my desk, window view, right beyond the computer here. I think it was the other day, a sharp-shinned hawk cruised right by as I was in the middle of a meeting. Luckily, it was a meeting among other naturalists, and they let me enjoy the bird. So can't always get away with that, but in this field, luckily I can. Look and listen more closely to the natural world, and slow down. Proceed slowly. That's one that I have had a little more trouble learning. It's taken a long time, but I feel like I'm finally able to slow down a little bit more, so I'm trying to observe those little things. So make sure to jot down a few notes. You might keep an eBird checklist. This is a great way of tracking your own life lists or backyard lists. I think Becky talked about her year lists last week. Maybe some of you saw that. And I really, my most important list to me is my backyard list. So I like to see how, what I'm seeing on a monthly basis, especially comparing trends over the 10 or so years that I've been in this particular house. And I can report that in the past 7 or 8 months, however long the pandemic's been going on, it is, oops, am I still on here? Can everybody still hear me? Just had a little glitch. So yeah, I've been seeing record numbers of birds every month in my backyard, and I'm sure that's having to do with spending more time at home. Maybe some of you are also spending a lot of time at home. If you could just give a thumbs up or something, let me know that you're still hearing me. Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, if you keep a list every day, keep some notes, you'll get to really be able to put it to memory a little bit better too, as to what's going on outside your own house maybe, or your own yard. You'll get to see changes, you'll get to see the comings and goings of different species and the seasons as a result of that. How wildlife relates to each other. You might take some behavioral notes, watching how a woodpecker might be working on the same tree. What's it looking for? What is it actually finding? Take a close look with binoculars. See if you can see it actually, eating a grub or something like that. That's always neat to see. We don't spend enough time looking at these behavioral changes, but I have to say this pandemic has been really revolutionary for a lot of people in their way of looking at things. And there have been lots of books written about bird behavior just in the past year or so. People are paying a lot more attention. This seems to be a really good time to get people's attention on things that we don't always look at. So yeah, back to those woodpeckers. Maybe they're feeding on an ash tree in your backyard that might be infested with the emerald ash borer. Any of you have emerald ash borers in your yard? It's an insect pest that the larva will work through the tree and end up killing the trees, creating these tunnels, and the woodpeckers will expose the disease by peeling off the bark, prying in search of this abundance of grubs that is in every one of these infested ash trees. And unfortunately, it is a disease that will kill most, if not all, ash trees in our area. And it's been radiating out from Concord over the past decade or so. So I have some here this winter for the first time. I noticed it. So the woodpeckers are going to town on the ash tree in my backyard. If you're in more of an urban or suburban environment, you might hone in on some of the movements and the vocalizations of the common city birds, the house sparrows, starlings, rock pigeons, and they might tell you when danger is approaching if you learn their language. And their language is both the way they move, the way they respond, and certainly vocally. You'll be able to pick up on different sounds that they're making. So I'm sure some of you have noticed that before. Not just a large flock of birds flying away from a hawk flying by, but a high-pitched call note, perhaps, that you didn't notice before. But so if you look and listen closer, you're going to hear things like that. And I would recommend one book I wanted to plug here today was a book called What the Robin Knows. with a nice picture of a robin's head on it with some other interesting artwork by John Young, What the Robin Knows. So I highly recommend that one for anybody interested in watching nature in greater detail. So maybe you're noticing some similar trends. If so, what's similar, what's different about what you're seeing? Chime in with a comment. I'll do my best to get to those. I have to admit, I don't always see the comments that you're posting, so it's possible I'll miss it. If I miss it now, I'll go back and send responses in the feed later on after the video's over. So you might try some winter tracking this month. Maybe you have already. It's a great chance to see how snow conditions impact wildlife directly. So after that heavy snow we had about a month ago, my family and I took notice of just how devoid of animal signs the woods have been right after that snow. We wondered, had everything, including the deer, the squirrels, the turkeys, where did they go? Did they go to sleep for the winter? Of course they didn't, but their movements were greatly reduced, and it became really hard to find where they were hanging out. So that became our challenge, finding some of the wintering areas where the deer yard up in areas of dense young hemlocks where the deer are browsing in times of high snow, because that limits the deer's mobility. Turkeys don't do a lot of exploring like they are right now all over the ice. They'll find a spot where there's maybe one food source and all huddle up, like in a plowed driveway or a backyard with a lot of bird feeders. But for us, they were hanging out in the pine trees, roosting at night, and we could see their droppings below. The squirrels were absent during that really deep snow. You might see the way squirrels move around on this icy cover now. It's like their claws are like nature's version of microspikes. You see how they just can cover icy ground really effectively. Really well adapted for ice walking. But they sure don't like jumping through deep snow, so we didn't see any for several days after that snow. Now they're all over the place. Many smaller mammals, though, are well adapted to burrow through the snow, and that's called subnivean. The subnivean species, like voles. Voles are one particular family that does very well at burrowing. Voles are like large mice. They have cyclical trends in their abundance. They're common. Right now they're super common. You might see some out during the day. I've been watching one in our compost pile in the backyard that likes to stick its head out of the coffee grounds, and it's been fun to capture that on with the trail camera that we have. So maybe you're seeing evidence of some of these subnivean creatures, and that in turn is connected to what's feeding on them. Some of the larger mammals like foxes, mink and weasel, which go after those. Maybe you're seeing signs of those animals with their tracks. Certainly the raptors have been more present this winter in much of New Hampshire than in most winters. So that's been a trend because of the voles and the other small mammals. So that's been a little bit of an effort to just talk about my birding goals, I guess, or a couple of them. Maybe more of an approach, really, for the new year. Essentially, it's an extension of what I was trying to do more in 2020, being here more often since the pandemic is keeping me in one place more. So 2021 is pretty similar to 2020 after all, isn't it? But there's plenty of other goals that I have, such as getting out with groups again, leading field trips. Hopefully that will all come in the summer and fall as we get to return to a more normal way of life at some point in 2021. We can all hope for that. I'll try to sprinkle some more of these 2021 birding and nature observation goals in coming months, because we all need some things to look forward to, and I'd love to hear if you have any of your own nature-related goals for 2021. Any new ways of looking at nature observation, anything that's working well for you. So post your comments here. I'd love to hear any of those. So one goal, as I kind of work through here, what I had to talk about today is, hang on a second, let me just check in on some of the comments. Okay. So one of the goals that you might incorporate is to visit a couple of Audubon sanctuaries. Maybe one each month, maybe just, one this year. That's fine. If you haven't been to any, I would strongly encourage you to go out and see them. We have wildlife sanctuaries in every part of the state, in every major tourism area of the state, and at least one in every county. So not all have easy access in the winter, so that's one limitation. But I'll talk about one right now, the Derry Wildlife Sanctuary. I guess I'm allowed to have favorites. It's up there in my list of favorites. It's one of the largest sanctuaries that we own. It's about 900 acres. And it's a great place to start your exploring with New Hampshire Audubon. Maybe some of you have been there before. Let's hear it if you have. Thumbs ups. So Derry has several miles of trails and a diversity of habitats, including a mosaic of different wetland types. It has beaver swamps, beaver meadows, places where there are a lot of dead trees that have come down, a lot of transition zones, and then beaver ponds as well. A large water feature there is called the Black Fox Pond, which is a 36-acre man-made pond, dammed up. We still have a dam that's working, that Audubon maintains, and a spillway below it. And that can be a great place to watch wildlife. That's one of the favorite places that I go, just for a quick scenic view or a quick look to see what's around there. We recently had a beaver deceiver unit installed, something that it's a device that allows beavers to continue to use a system, a wetland system, without impacting the human interest areas. So without flooding roads and trails, essentially, in this case. So we were able to find that balancing point by installing some high-tech series of culverts and pipes and cages to keep the beavers out and allowing water to flow freely, allowing beavers to stay in a pond and maintain that water level at a certain height. So it's good for everybody, essentially. But anyway, great place to watch wildlife. Generally, the Derry Sanctuary is located between Concord and Keene, off the Route 9 corridor, and it's a quiet place most of the time, where you can spread out across these 900 acres of woodland-dominated habitats. There's a nice mix of elevation gain, some flat stretches, and some really excellent views of the Monadnock region. I enjoy the chance there to find lots of tracks in the winter, including bobcat, mink, otter, weasels, fisher. I've seen moose tracks in recent years, so moose are not easy to find in southern New Hampshire, but even their tracks are pretty scarce now. But when you have large patches of forests with intentionally managed woodlands that have been set for young forest species like moose require large chunks of young forest that's regenerating in order for their best foraging opportunities. The Abenaki word for moose means twig eater. So moose is a wood and bark specialist. So yeah, moose are still out there, hard to find, but consider yourselves lucky if you do see one. So the wetlands along Clement Hill Road are some excellent places to watch wildlife. There's a trail, the Black Fox Pond Trail, which goes around most of Black Fox Pond on both sides. And another favorite spot is a large forest clearing that we made through forest management about 5 years ago. And this is along North Road, where safe parking is possible there. There are several other large clearings, too, that I was talking about, which were created with due to the forest management that we intentionally were trying to manage for birds and other wildlife. I'm going to post a link to the Derry Sanctuary right here, so you'll have a place to go to look for it on the new Audubon website. All right, that's posted now. So let's see. Let me see if I can get to some of the questions that are below. I'll start to circle back around to birds here as I begin to wrap things up. A couple of questions came in. It was from Pamela here. And Pamela says, with the free time retirement and the great pandemic have brought me, I've been training chickadees and red-breasted nuthatches to eat out of my hand. All right, excellent. I've learned so much about their habits. Is there a downside I should know about? I can't think of a downside, really. There may be, there's such a widespread species. Chickadees and nuthatches are widespread and common throughout our woods. If you have the patience to hold your hands out with seed and spend the time, good for you. It takes a lot of patience in the cold weather, especially. It's not going to change the way these birds interact with our species at this point. First of all, I don't think enough people are going to do that in a way where it changes their habits and makes them dependent on people. In fact, being dependent on bird feeders is really, it's a question that we get a lot at Audubon. By feeding the birds at different seasons, am I going to make them dependent? Not at all. I wouldn't worry about that. So if you could manage to grab one, you would have to have super fast reflexes if you're actually feeding them. So, I don't think you're going to do any harm, or anybody else is going to be able to do any harm by training a few chickadees and nuthatches. Enjoy it. It's a great experience. I know my daughter has learned to do that recently too, and it's been a thrill. There's a place in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, where the birds are well accustomed to people feeding them out of their hands, and they've been thriving like that for a long time. The beech forest in Provincetown. So, another question here. Pamela put up a bluebird house last year, the first bluebird house. Within half an hour, a pair of barn swallows had claimed it. I think you probably mean tree swallows. They're the cavity nesting swallow that we would have in fields, with a bluish back, white below. Barn swallows have the forked tail, split tail. They're a little rustier undersides, and they nest not in nest boxes, but on underneath hanging structures like eaves of a roof. So, bridges they like to attach to a side of a structure. But anyway, are excellent foragers of insect pests, so mosquitoes, a lot of other insects that they clean up. You want them around. They're good friends to have. They do compete, though, and bluebirds are generally a little harder to attract into certain habitat types, especially if you have larger fields. You may want to try putting up multiple nest boxes if you have the room for it, in certain proximity to each other, to allow a choice for the bluebirds and the tree swallows. And maybe you'll get a bluebird eventually. So keep it up, and good job for putting up a nest box and maintaining it. And I'd probably leave it alone for the winter. I usually clean out boxes in early April before the birds start to nest again. Right now, nest boxes could be really good habitat for a lot of the little critters like mice, and maybe even some roosting birds at night. So let whatever's in there go until April, I would say. Let's see. And let's see, you also mentioned sitting outside reading when a sound of a supersonic jet right next to my head made me scream in surprise. A raptor picked some kind of songbird off, moving so quickly that I never had a chance to identify it. Interesting. Well, I don't know any bird that can generate the sound of a supersonic jet. But if it did pick off a bird, it must have been first pretty close to you, and secondly pretty fast. So birds can certainly make some sounds with their feathers as they whiz right past you. I think of the sound of raven wings flying overhead. Ravens have a particularly loud wing beat. Owls, on the other hand, do not make any sound at all. They're adapted to silently swoop around. I was calling for owls in my backyard the other night, and I was whistling for a saw-whet owl, which has been around in our backyard this winter. Saw-whet owl is small. It's about a 6-inch tall owl, very tiny. What swooped in was much larger than a saw-whet owl. It came into a tree at about eye level, and it was a barred owl. It was looking at me, but I didn't hear it. I just saw this shadow cruise by right around a little bit after sunset. It was hunting the northern saw-whet owl, so luckily it did not come in and try to swoop down on my face. That could have been a close call. But anyway, thank you for the questions. I hope I'm not missing other questions that have come in here. But, oh, okay. Now I'm seeing a few, so apologies if I have not gotten to all of them. But yeah, peregrine falcons are back at the Brady Sullivan Tower. It seems early, but maybe this mild winter is leading them to stay a little more local and think about nesting already. The building in Manchester. So back to my spiel about birds. I wanted to wrap up with a few bird observations in the world of rare birds in New Hampshire. So, rare birds are always an added excitement during the winter on the New Hampshire birding scene. A first state record, Sage Thrasher from the high desert mountains, the high deserts of the West, has shown up in the town of Hinsdale, New Hampshire, in the southwestern part of the state. And I'll show you a photo, an image from a field guide here of the Sage Thrasher. This guy up here, this little brown streaky bird with a longish tail, a pretty long and slightly down-curved bill, not as strongly decurved as the other thrashers. The familiar thrasher that we would see in the East Coast, which is not super common anymore, is this brown thrasher here. Hopefully I still have you. So brown thrasher is the common one, but Sage Thrasher, first state record from the desert Southwest. So pretty remarkable record from out that way. Let's see. Yeah, dozens of birders, maybe hundreds of birders have gotten to see that bird, including myself. In the southeastern corner of the state, the Townsend's warbler, a bird of the Pacific coast forests, has been visiting a bird feeder in Derry. Very unusual record, but certainly not unprecedented in New Hampshire. I think there may be about 10 previous records in the state. This bird here with a lot of yellow on the face, with a big black patch in the face. It looks very similar to a species that we have as a common breeder in the summer, the black-throated green warbler, which has more of a yellow face and a blackish throat. So very similar. Obviously, these two were the same species at one point in evolutionary history, and they branched off, probably because of a geographic barrier such as the Rocky Mountains. That's the case. That's a whole other story I could tell at some point. But yeah, Townsend's warbler coming to a suet feeder. So you never know what's going to show up. One last rare bird I'd like to mention is one that I got to see in Keene the other day. It was discovered on the Christmas bird count, and it was it's a rare bird for New Hampshire. Oops, hang on a second. There it is. Okay, I'm going to show you on my computer screen here. Oops. Where'd you go? Oh, there it is. This is the red-headed woodpecker, not to be mistaken for the red-bellied woodpecker, which is becoming a common backyard bird in much of southern New Hampshire. Red-headed woodpecker has a fully red head. You can't mistake that one. Fully red head, white below, black and white patches on the wings, long chisel-like bill. It's about 8 inches or so in size, and yeah, just pretty remarkable record. That was my photo from a few days ago in Keene, and the bird's been seen ever since the Christmas count. So some super exciting stuff out there in the way of rare birds. And lastly, I guess, as the redpolls are starting to move through in big numbers, enough now to attract the even less common Hoary Redpoll, which is a bird that's even less common in its range in northern Canada, and looks a little bit like this. It's a paler and generally larger version of the common redpoll. Male here showing a lot of red underneath, a red cap, little black chin spot. So hoary redpolls, if you look really closely at flocks of common redpolls, which may start feeders in greater numbers, they're still feeding on a lot of birch seeds in the woods and in old fields. You may, take a close look and see if you see something that resembles this. It can be a tricky identification, so it's certainly worth paying attention to all the individuals in a certain flock, as always. And that's the way you start to notice what's different. You look at the common stuff. So maybe you'll find something unexpected too. Oh, okay, I may have you back now. Sorry if I lost you there. But just in finishing up here, I'd love to hear for next time around what have you been seeing? What's exciting you? Maybe you can share with us next week or next month when I'm back. But that's about all the time we have for now. I kept you a little long today, so thank you, class, for staying late. I look forward to joining you again on a future Ask the Naturalist segment. When I do, I'll discuss more wildlife sanctuaries to visit. I'll share my perspective of my own backyard and what's going on statewide in the birding scene. And lastly, if you're not already a member of New Hampshire Audubon, please consider joining us. We rely on your support in order to keep you connected to nature in this time and always. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again on the second Thursday of February. Time to be determined, so stay tuned to the Audubon Facebook page. Thanks again, everybody.